Students help me clarify my own ideas. They bring perspectives to me about particular issues that we're discussing in class that I would never have thought of on my own. They read, as it were, my stuff before it's written, because I frequently try it out in class. And they tend to be really good judges, it seems to me, of stuff that's authentic and stuff that's bullshit. And they don't let me get by with too much at all. I've always thought that Gettysburg College in particular, and any university or liberal arts college in general, really ought to try and not so much prepare students for life in the outside real world in the sense of training them professionally, as preparing them in the sense of offering them an alternative for 4 years to the world that they came from and the world they're going to re-enter, in the hopes that that 4-year can be seen as an apprentice period in becoming a human. Not becoming book smart, you can pick that up on your own, but becoming a human. And I think that's what they want, that's what they expect. I'm not cynical about students here at Gettysburg College, and I'm really not cynical about the generation of students that we're talking about anywhere in the country. It seems to me they've got a lot more on the ball in certain fundamental ways than people of my generation might. I think that my students generally are really looking for some kind of deep meaning to their lives. They recognize in one way or another, at one level or another, that they've been sold a bill of goods, and that they've internalized that bill of goods to such an extent that even they recognize it's going to be hard for them to let go of it. The consumer society, the addictive society, the immediate gratification society, and perhaps more than anything else, the I've got to be perfect or I'm an absolute failure mentality that our society encourages, and that certainly all of the Gettysburg College students that I've ever come into contact with have imbibed from an early age. But at the same time, they recognize there's something wrong with that. They don't know exactly what the alternatives might be. And when you start talking with them about countercultural, because that's what my books are all about, countercultural alternatives when it comes to values, such as meekness or such as mercy, you can begin to see a kind of aha recognition go off in their eyes. They may resist to a certain extent, and that's fine, because they've got to find their own way to wherever it is that they need to go. But there's certainly recognition that you can see. And that gives me a great deal of hope, because I'll tell you, when I talk to grown-up audiences, there's not that kind of receptivity, as generally speaking, as I see in the students at all. There's an incredible intimacy in a class that lasts a semester. You know, it's in a certain way, it's like a family, in the best and the not so good sense of the word. You know, you know what to expect from different people, given different chains of conversation. You know that some people have ideas that they're obsessed with, and they're going to bring them in at any opportunity. I'm probably one of those people at times in classes. You know that there are people who are going to try and be the reconcilers if something tense occurs in class. You know, there are people who are going to be the provocateurs to try and get things rolling. But underneath all of that family dynamic, if you will, there's a level of trust that I think, when a class works, develops, that really takes everybody in the class away from the traditional sort of professor-student relationship. There are absolutely no rituals in completing a book, largely because when I'm at the stage that the book that I'm working on is just about ready to be sent to my editor, I'm already thinking about the next book. But there are definite I never thought about this until to this moment. There are definite rituals in starting a book. The room in which I worked, isn't this bizarre? I've never thought about this before. The room in which I do most of my writing, for instance, gets thoroughly scrubbed between books. The minute that I get a new book idea, even when I'm working on the old book, I somehow feel the compulsion to straighten books and dust shelves and mop the floor and clean the windows of the room. And I'm sure that's got to be a ritual that I hadn't really been consciously aware of before. I used to smoke a lot, and I can distinctly remember that I would have to buy a new ashtray to put by the computer or by the typewriter or by the pad. I wrote my first books longhand. So yeah, there are strange little rituals like that, I suppose, at the inception, but I can't think of any at the end. I generally write first thing in the morning. I tend to write generally between 2:30 or 3 and 6 in the morning. It's just my body clock. That's just what I do. I revise endlessly. I've been here 20 years at the college, and I've cranked out about a book a year, but it takes me the full year to do the book. I'm never satisfied with what I write, and I think that's probably par for the course for anybody who writes, to be honest with you. I also think that I've written way too much, and I've tended to, a lot of times, become so infatuated with the act of writing that I've not been as mindful as I could have been and should have been about what I'm writing. And so what I'm trying to do for the next 3 or 4 years is just to declare a moratorium. There are too many damn books in the world, and there's way too many Walters books in the world as it is. And it would be nice, it seems to me, if I can just kind of recollect myself for a while instead of feeling that I have to keep cranking out book after book. Nietzsche has got this wonderful image in his book about Zarathustra, this prophet that he's contrived. Zarathustra goes up to the mountain in order to be refilled after spending years and years down in the valley preaching. And he finally comes back down the mountain, Nietzsche tells us, like a bee laden with pollen. He's discovered something that he needs to say again. And that's sort of what I feel I need to do these days. The book is called Merciful Meekness, and basically what I'm trying to do in the book is to suggest a way for human existence to be more integrated than I fear it is now, that we tend to be fragmented, we tend to compartmentalize our lives. Going back to something I said earlier, we tend to give lip service to certain virtues such as mercy and meekness. That's one compartment. But when we go out in the business world or the political world or sometimes the interpersonal one-on-one world, we have completely different values, and that's another compartment. And that kind of fragmentation, compartmentalization, seems to me to not only be dicey when it comes to morality, but it's also not very good for human beings. Questions of identity get all murky. And so in this particular book, what I try to do is to bring at least 2 of those compartments together when it comes to the virtues of mercy on the one hand and meekness on the other. Let me put this passage in context. One of the things that I've tried to argue in Merciful Meekness is that in exercising meekness on the one hand and mercy on the other in relations with other human beings, we enable them to become more fully human. But what I've also wanted to argue in this book is that there's a vertical relationship going on as well as a horizontal one, that as we enable other humans to be more fully what they can be, we also enable God to be more fully what God can be. I think one of the conceits of the West, at any rate, not so much the East, is that we are utterly dependent upon God, but God isn't dependent upon us in any way. That's certainly not biblical, and there's no rational reason for presuming that God isn't dependent upon us as well. So this particular passage speaks to that vertical dependency. The original connection between God and human beings is so intimate that our enabling of others into full being also mysteriously enables God to be fully God. God graciously midwives us into the new birth of personhood, and when we humbly receive the gift of life, we in turn become midwives for and of God. We who have been enabled now live in such a way as to enable the great enabler. And it seems to me that thinking about our relationship to one another and to God in that way really does do a great deal to avoid the compartmentalization and the fragmentation that is so much a part, I think, of contemporary life.